Revolution. Learning about the France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. The situation in France continued to be tense. Although Louis XVI had signed the constitution, he entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Rulers of other neighboring countries were worried by the developments in France and made plans to send troops to put down the events that had been taking place there since the summer of 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of volunteers thronged from the provinces to join the army. They saw this as a war of the people against kings and aristocracies all over Europe. Among the patriotic songs they sung was the Marseillaise, composed by the poet Roger de l'Isle. It was sung for the first time by the volunteers from Marseilles as they marched into Paris and so got its name. The Marseillaise is now the national anthem of France. The Revolutionary Wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the people. While the men were away fighting at the front, women were left to cope with the task of earning a living and looking after their families. Large sections of the population were convinced that the revolution had to be carried further, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of society. Political clubs became an important rallying point for people who wished to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of the Jacobins, which got its name from the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. Women too, who had been active throughout this period, formed their own clubs. The members of the Jacobin Club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of society. They included small shopkeepers, artisans such as shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, printers, as well as servants and daily wage workers. Their leader was Maximilien Robespierre. A large group among the Jacobins decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by dock workers. This was to set themselves apart from the fashionable sections of society, especially nobles who wore knee breeches. These Jacobins came to be known as the sans culottes, literally meaning those without knee breeches. Sans culottes men wore in addition the red cap that symbolized liberty. Women, however, were not allowed to do so. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection of a large number of Parisians who were angered by the short supplies and high prices of food. On the morning of August 10th, they stormed the place of the Tuileries, massacred the king's guards, and held the king himself as hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family. Elections were held. From now on, all men of 21 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. The newly elected assembly was called the Convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. In a republic is a form of government. People elect the government, including the head of the government. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason. On 21st January 1793, he was executed publicly at the Place de la Concorde. The Queen Marie Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. The Reign of Terror. Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. Maximilien Robespierre. He was the mastermind of the Reign of Terror. He was the leader of the Committee of Public Safety. The Executive Committee of the National Convention. Therefore, the most powerful man in France. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as the Reign of Terror. Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. All those whom he saw as being enemies of the Republic, ex-nobles and clergy, members of other political parties, even members of his own party who did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned, and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, they were guillotined. The guillotine is a device consisting of two poles and a blade with which a person is beheaded. It was named after Dr. Guillotin, who invented it. Robespierre's government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. Meat and bread were rationed. Peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it at prices fixed by the government. The use of more expensive white flour was forbidden. All citizens were required to eat the pain d'Égalité equality bread, a loaf made of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to be practiced through forms of speech and address. Instead of the traditional monsieur, sir, and madame, all French men and women were henceforth citoyen and citoyenne, citizen. Churches were shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that even his supporters began to demand moderation. Finally, he was convicted by a court in July 1794, arrested, and on the next day sent to the guillotine. A Directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-propertied sections of society. It provided for 2 elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory, an executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the Legislative Council, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the Directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of freedom, of equality before the law and of fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and the rest of Europe during the following century. Summary: 1792, September 21. Formal abolition of the monarchy. The National Convention is the new government of France. 1792, August 10. Storming of the Tuileries. Overthrow of the monarchy. France is now a republic. 1792, August 13. The royal family is thrown into the Temple prison. 1793, January 21st. Execution of Louis XVI. 1793, March 11. The Wars of the Vendée begin. 1793, September 5th, July 27, 1794, the Reign of Terror. 1793, October 16, execution of Marie Antoinette. 1794, July 28th, execution of Robespierre. That is all in this topic. Let us learn about, did women have a revolution? In our next topic.